in the overall, if there were an overall theme to the shortcut presentation here today, it's an understanding that SolidWorks over the last 4 or 5 years has worked very diligently to offer tools to make people much more efficient with the software. And that has even manifested itself in the welcome screen. And the welcome screen is part of this, and I'm sure you're all familiar with it, but I just want to go over one aspect of it. Now notice at the very top of that screen it says welcome as appropriate, but it says you're running SolidWorks Premium, and that says 2019 Service Pack 1. Okay, so this has been around for a couple of years already, this welcome screen like this, but there's been a couple of new additions and wrinkles to it that you may be unaware of, or maybe this is the sort of thing that people just jump right over and don't pay any attention to at all. Right underneath that line, there are 4 little buttons or 4 little tabs. It says Home, Recent, Learn, and Alerts. The Home one is the one that you're most familiar with. That's what comes up anytime you light up SolidWorks or hit that little house on a prairie icon in the toolbar. We'll talk about recent here in more detail in a second. The Learn tab is going to give you access to training videos and even to something called My SolidWorks, where you can get some understanding and cute little 10-15 minute vignettes of how to do specific and certain things within SolidWorks. The Alerts tab is going to do exactly that, alert you to new releases, to new service packs coming out, and also to alert you to recent, the solution to issues that have been nagging SolidWorks for a while. So if there's been some sort of a specific service pack that is going to address a need that has been addressed by a lot of people, has been requested by a lot of people, you'll see it noted there in alerts. You'll also see things like early visibility. So when you have a opportunity to download an early visibility version of a service pack, you can see that as well in there. But going back in here to this recent document or this recent tab, it defaults to the recent documents that you've opened, and this can list up to 100 of the last files that you opened, and I find this extremely helpful. I can't, it's difficult sometimes to remember what you had for breakfast, let alone what you worked on last week. But there's a particular file, you notice there's a slider here on the right hand column. You're able to go down through this and look at any and all files that you worked at, and you can set this up to 100. Now, underneath that is a quick filter. So that 100 files or whatever value you set this for, you could say only show me the parts or the sub-assemblies, only show me the drawings, only show me the top level assemblies. You also have the opportunity to filter this by name. So if there's a part number or a name or even part of a name that you remember, type it into that little space, and that file will pop up to the very beginning of this list. Speaking of this list, this is a kind of revolving door thing. So let's say you have this thing set for 100 files, as I do. What you're going to find is that as you get to 100 in there and you add 101, the very first one drops off the list. Okay, so it's the latest and greatest or the latest 100 files. Now, this is not just something that comes up at the beginning. You can open this anytime you want, at any point in any SolidWorks session, working on any part or drawing or assembly, by just typing the letter R, and this will pop up in the middle of your screen. Okay, so how do you set this for 100? You'd set it just like this. You're going to come up here to the system options, and the very first item at the very top is going to tell you how to set that value. Now, the maximum number is 100. You could set it to 99. You can set it to 37. You can set it to your age, whatever you wish. But whatever it is, it's going to sit right there, and that's how you adjust it. Okay. So going back into that just briefly one other time, if you want to select one of those images, and you'll notice that I talked about pinning these things so it doesn't fall off the thing. In the red circle, you'll see in that image there in the upper right hand corner the profile of what looks like a push pin. That's a push pin. And when you select it, when you left click on it, that's going to take that file and leave it up at the top row there, and it will not be subject to revolving off the screen. But the other options that you will have there, it says to open that file, obviously. If you clicked on that radio button, you'd see the other option is to open it in read-only mode, okay? But then other modes would be resolved. Other options that you would have in there would be lightweight, and one new one that we're going to talk about here in a second. If it's a configured file, you have the opportunity to open a different configuration than the default one, as also with display states, and then reference files that it may be talking to too. So there's a great bit of information here available right from the open screen. A lot of your searching can be handled right here, okay, which is a huge time saver. And what we're going to see right here is a new nuance for 2020. And I'm going to go ahead and open this file. And as you can see, I can go to the mode. And the one I want to show you is the detailing mode. This is new for 2020. And when I select this file, again, I have the option to open it or open it in read-only mode. When I go to open it, I'm opening a drawing. And the drawing is I'm going to be able to do certain things, add annotations and notes and balloons and things like that. I can print it and save it, but it opens the drawing only. Now, the problem that this addresses has been around for a long time. When people go to open up a simple drawing like this, it's not a big deal, and it opens rather quickly. But if you're opening the drawing of a very, very large top-level assembly, it takes a long time. And that's been the issue. What takes so long to open up the drawing when it's just a single page, perhaps, or maybe 2 or 4 pages? What's taking so long? Well, what's taking so long is the fact that SolidWorks is opening up the model in the background. So if you were with us a couple of weeks ago when we talked about how SolidWorks opens up those models, this could be very, very time consuming if you're pulling these files from across a network server, where we talked about going up and down those stairways and talked about the time consuming effort of opening files, and they open up one feature at a time, one part at a time, and then all the mates. That's going on in the background. You don't see the model, but until that model comes up, then the drawing comes up. So what SolidWorks has done now for 2020 is created this detailing mode. Now what this is going to do is open up the drawing without opening up the model in the background. And the beauty of that is that the drawing itself, as one would suspect, opens up very quickly. And it opens up very quickly, but since the model is not in the background, you have a limited number of things that you can do with it. You can put in reference dimensions, okay? Because those don't need to go back to the model. You cannot put on it, if I missed some dimensions in here, I can't go back and add those dimensions, only as a reference, okay? Because the model itself is not associated with it. I can add balloons to an assembly drawing. I can add notes, and especially if these notes happen to be in my design library, drag them and drop them on there. I can take this isometric view here and I can push it to a second page. I can add pages to it, but everything needs to be at the drawing level, not incorporating the model. And that's what detailing mode is. If you want to open this up just to print it, just to review it, it opens up lightning fast because, again, it's just the paper, okay? So a really nice addition for 2020. and one that everybody really needs to take advantage of, whether you're using large assembly models or not. Next thing we're talking about is, and I find this to be, this has been around for a long time, but this is something that a lot of people seem to miss. I visit companies, used to visit companies, hopefully we'll visit them again soon. And when people are working on 4 or 5 or 8 or 15 different models in session, you'll find that they have them all located on the bar. They're all reduced on the bar to minimize their size, and then they open up another. You don't have to do that. Just open up another part, open up another session right on top of the one that you have. And then holding the control tab, holding the control key down and poking the tab key one time, you can get this window, open documents, and it will show you everything that you have open in session. You take your cursor and you left click on the particular model you want to continue to work on, and that one becomes front and center. I also see some people, when I first tell them about this, hold the control key down and the tab key continuously, so this window goes up, but that little blue highlight you see on the second image races around this screen at 60 hertz, and it's just rather entertaining, but doesn't really get you anywhere. So be careful of that. So to hold the control key, leave it down, poke the tab key one time, and then you can select the other models that you have open in session. Don't reduce them, just jump to the next one. One of the finest things about SolidWorks, I think overall, this goes back to day one when they first introduced this, is SolidWorks is built on a Windows platform. And it allows it to do a lot of things that you can do in Windows. For example, you can, when you're working in Windows, you can have Microsoft Word open, you can have Excel open, you can have a couple of different Word documents open, and you can put them both on the screen at the same time, sharing that space. Well, you can do the same thing in SolidWorks because it's playing on that same platform. So in a case like this, you can take an assembly, or you can take a part, or whatever you wish, and you can position them side by side, one on top of the other. You could split this up into 4 sections if you want to try and see that well. And in a case like this, if you're working on the assembly on the left, you can add a feature to it or modify a feature to it and immediately see the reaction to it in the image on the right. Okay, how do you know which one you're playing in? That's going to be a function of that heads-up display that you see above that, above the assembly and the image on the left. As soon as I clicked on the right, left-clicked on the right, that would all jump, and I would be playing on the right side of the image. Okay, so it's a really nice way to look at something from 2 different perspectives at the same time. Really nice little tool. Speaking of nice little tools, one of the things that we like to do from time to time is add features to our toolbars. And again, even though toolbars are not all that, hopefully in the future, not going to be all that necessary or required, oftentimes there is a need to put new features in there. And if you were with us last week when we talked about splines, you saw me use this particular tool, and that is this command search option that is in the upper right-hand corner of your SolidWorks screen. And in this case, I want to find a cosmetic thread that I want to add to a particular hole that I've put into a part. So I go up into that little box there with the right adjacent to that image of that silhouette of a person, and I start typing cosmetic thread. So SolidWorks is immediately looking for whatever has COS in it, comes up with cosmetic thread when I add the M, and I now have 3 options in here. You see on the extreme right of that new box in there, there's an eyeball. Okay, if I left click on that eyeball without moving my cursor, SolidWorks will go find the cosmetic thread tool for me, and and actually position, and it will cascade through all of the different drop downs. And when it finds it and it locates it, it generates this big red arrow and points to it. It's like right here, it's right here. To this day, even though this has been out for a while, I think this has been a suggestion that was offered to SolidWorks on behalf of my wife, because she constantly tells me that I can look at stuff and not see it. So you need a big red arrow that says, it's right here. Okay, so then you can click on it and activate it. Option number 2 is to click on the words themselves, Cosmetic thread, and it will just execute the function. But let's say, for example, you're going to do this on a fairly regular basis, and so you want to add that icon to the toolbar. There's the icon at the left end of that little rectangle, and then you can left click on it and drag it and drop it onto your toolbar. It's a great way to populate your toolbars with the tools that you want, the tools that you're going to use on a regular basis. Now, we talked about, and this whole thing about user interface shortcuts is, like I said before, has been around for a while, and it seems like the function is to minimize the need for the toolbar at the top of the screen. There's also, as you'll see in upcoming issues here, the need or the ability to minimize the design tree. So first thing we're going to do is talk about some of the shortcuts that reduce the need for the toolbar at the top. And you saw me use some of this last week if you were here, because as we were talking about splines, it was no real trick to move my cursor to where I needed the spline to generate from, and then poof, this little pop-out toolbar came out. Well, the way the poof happens is, you can't see, but I'm selecting the S key on my keyboard, and that generates this Flyout toolbar. And that Flyout toolbar is available in all 4 modes. So if I'm sketching, working with a part, an assembly, or a drawing, this toolbar is available, but changes to the tools that I would need in each of those 4 modes. So as I was creating a spline, I would hit the letter S, and there's my spline tool right there. Okay, so I could just click on it. I don't have to go up to the toolbar. The purpose for that is that if you're doing this all day long, you're doing this a lot, what you're going to find is that when you're looking on the model itself where you want to apply this particular tool, you move your eyes to the toolbar and then back down to where you want to use the tool. And you're moving just your eyes. The problem with that over a period of time, and it varies from person to person, is that your eyes get strained. And that's what generates sometimes the headache. And so SolidWorks has come up with this Flyout toolbar that brings this toolbar out at the stroke of the letter S key on your keyboard, wherever your cursor is. So you can populate this to whatever you want. And the way you do that is you put your cursor in this window, you right click, and you'll see the word customize. And when the word customize comes out, you'll be able to add by drag and drop any other tool that you want to bring into here. Now notice that on the bottom row here, there's 2 tools that are grayed out. There's extruded boss and extruded cut. All right. They're not really part of the sketch routine, but they're used immediately after. So put them in there anyway, because the very next tool that you're going to use after your sketch is complete and fully dimensioned is either to create it as an extruded boss or an extruded cut, at which time you'll find that these things will be lit up and ready to go. Okay, now this is a nice shortcut, but my overall favorite is this guy right here, mouse gestures. Now, a lot of people, when I talk to them about this, will tell me that, you know, I see this little circle show up every once in a while. I don't know where it comes from, and as soon as I try and see it and figure out what it's doing, it disappears. Well, it's what I kindly referred to as a life preserver. Okay, it's a wheel, and it comes in 4 modes: sketch, part, assembly, and drawing. Each one can be adorned with whatever tools that you want to use in that particular mode. Notice that if you're not going to use it, it's going to gray out. But and as of 2 years ago, this would now go up to 12 gestures. For a long time, it was only available in 4 or 8. And as soon as you get a little taste of this, you want to use it all the time. Between this and the S key, you don't need that top toolbar virtually at all. And the way you add tools to this, because you can decorate this however you want. I mean, there's factory settings, if I can use that term. But in the little box there on the left-hand side, you'll see at the top it says all commands, or you can go underneath there and say search for, or you can use the slider and go find the tool. The easiest way is to click in the search for area and search for splines, for example. And then you left click on the icon itself under that command category, left click on it, drag it onto the wheel that you want, and then let go of it in the position that you want. Okay, so when you're in a sketch or a part or a drawing or an assembly, what you're going to do is you're going to hold the right mouse button down. Just click the right mouse button down and drag your mouse a little bit. Okay, and that's the key, a little bit. When you drag it just a little bit within the space of that center part of the life preserver, if you will, you'll see all of the different tools on there. And then you can just drag your cursor across the tool that you wish to use, and you're using it. It takes a little bit of calibration, if you will, to get the hang of that. But within 10 minutes, you should be using this very, very well, and very quickly. And like I said last week, when I was doing the splines, I did not have a spline on here because my personal criteria for putting something on that wheel and where it is if I use the tool, say 3 or more times in an hour, then it goes on here. If I use it less frequently than that, like in the case of the splines, then it goes on the Flyout toolbar on the letter S. But it's a huge time saver. It really, really is. And lets you focus on the model itself and not on the tools. Okay? And like I said, you can set this for up to 12 different gestures. So another way of, well, this is a tool that helps you eliminate the need for the design tree, and that's a tool called breadcrumbs. Now, let's say, for example, I want some information on this button right here, so I can left click on it. I hit the letter D in this case, and here are the breadcrumbs. Now, it tells me I can open up this part, and notice right above there are the mates related to that part. And notice that the bullseye, the concentric mate, has a clear circle. That's because it's not been executed. So I can lock that rotation by just left-clicking, right-clicking on that. And here's my breadcrumbs down here again. Notice the bullseye's filled in. Okay. I can also just simply, I want to go look at that part by itself. I can just open it up from there. Never do my hands leave my arms, nor do I ever have to go to the design tree. A really, really nice time saver, because where is it in the design tree? Now, this is a pretty simple part. Okay, even the flashlight top level assembly has not got a lot of parts in it, but where is it? And speaking of where is it, if you are opening up an assembly, what you want to be able to do is to select the part that you want to investigate with a left click, and you want to see where that is in the design tree, okay, if you want some more information on it, at least at that level. Well, you're not going to get it unless you set this particular option. And this is going into the feature manager tree and selecting the design tree expansion. In order to do this, you need to go into system options, drop down to the feature manager and highlight that one image there, or that one option at the very top that says scroll selected item into view. What that's going to let you do is, as you select on a particular component in your assembly, let's say it's several layers down underneath a couple of different sub-assemblies, it's going to pop it out just like you see it on the right-hand side. So no matter how far down in the assembly it is, it's going to show you what that part is and let you open it up and deal with it right there. So it's a really, really nice shortcut that lets you find parts that are buried deep down inside a larger assembly. But at this point, you've made your design tree quite a mess, right? It's expanded all over the place, and then you got to go back and hit those little plus signs and close it back up. Again, SolidWorks is built on a Windows platform, and in order to really collapse all of those trees, just put your cursor over that tree any place and do a shift and the letter C. Okay, sounds like a great SolidWorks addition, but that's really a Windows function. So as you could do it in any other Windows thing, you could do it here too. So one of the other tools that you may be looking for instead of a particular part is not necessarily a part in a design tree, but a part in the model. And so what I want to show you is this little feature here at the top of the tree that looks like a golf tee. It's actually a filter. So in this particular case, I'm going to look for sleeves. All I need to type is SLE, and every sleeve in that assembly pops up, okay, and is made visible. Anything that's got the word, got the letters SLE in it, in this case, it's sleeve, but it could be in the part number, it could be in a description, it could be in a top level assembly or a sub assembly. It's going to search it, it's going to filter it out and bring it out to you. That is a really, really nice shortcut. Let's say, for example, you have been given the task of fixing a part that somebody else did. Not that that's never happened before, but one of the best ways of starting a little effort like that is to review the design tree and figure out what this person did and in the order in which they did it. And so you're going to take the model, you bring it into session, and now you got to go down and get the rollback bar. You left click on the rollback bar, and now you got to figure out how to get it back up to the top, and you get it up to the top. And now you're going to take it one at a time. You're going to bring it back down, and again and again and again and again. And to get it up and down is painfully time consuming. So, and I hope you all noticed that the rollback bar has gained a little weight in the last couple of years. It's about 5 pixels wide now. So here's another way of doing it faster and easier, much more efficient. Go into System Options to the Feature Manager and click on Arrow Key Navigation. Now, let's say I'll do the shortcut here and left click and go up, bring the bar up there. Now, just left click on the arrow on the rollback bar. And now I can negotiate it up and down however I want using the up and down arrow keys on my keyboard. Okay, I can go down, I can go up, I can go whatever I want to do, however I want to do it. I can also now right click on the rollback bar itself and say I'm done with this, roll it to the end. Okay, very nice shortcut. Arrow key navigation. If you don't turn it on, you can't play with it. Next thing is a part reviewer. Part reviewer is a tool that allows you to item by item, feature by feature, go down through a part and add a comment to it. Okay, so for those of you that do design reviews and you let your peers review your parts, as painful as that may be, you can send them your part. They can go through it and go down feature by feature through the tree and add a comment. Okay, so they can see which one of these particular features they're looking at, and they can add a comment to it. Okay, and then they send it back to the originator, who can then review these things and just review the ones that have a particular comment on them. and then make whatever necessary adjustments are being requested. And for those of you that think that this is a great way to challenge the mental stability of the originator of this thing, be prepared to, that ain't gonna work because when you send these notes, it goes back to the originator, but it also identifies who sent the note. So the day and the date and the name of the computer is associated with this. So they're gonna know who said what. Sometimes when you're working on a large assembly or a large part like this, you want to take a look at the design tree, but not just from this perspective, because underneath each one of these features is several sketches. And you may want to look at those for their completeness or whatever the issue is. You can right click at the top, go to the design tree display and say, give me the flat tree, okay? And that will pull out all of the hidden sketches. Let you look at all of this information, see which sketches still need to be fully defined, okay? And to further analyze what was done, how it was done, and how complete it is, okay? A great tool when you have to clean up somebody else's mess.
Hey, Paul.
Yes, sir.
Just real short. And those are two good things that would be good as part of a workflow whenever somebody's having to approve or approve drawings and things like that, or models. So
yep,
as part of the PDM workflow, those could be implemented in that too. So just
they can.
Part of the ecosystem.
This is these are tools often used by the CAD police, formerly known in an earlier life as checkers. There's some, let's say you've got a design of a model that when you do a complete rebuild, okay, that's a control Q, holding down the control key and striking the Q key, rebuilds the model from the origin all the way to the bottom. And if your model is particularly complex, but the first part of it has been worked out and is pretty solid, you can use something like this particular tool right here, the enable that you can turn on the freeze bar. And when you turn on the freeze bar, that appears in this particular case at the very top of the design tree. You drag it down with the left click to the point at which everything north of that, everything above that is complete, works fine, doesn't need to be rebuilt. And then only the things that are south of there, the things that you just recently did perhaps, are going to get rebuilt. This is a great time saver for painfully complex models. And speaking of complex models, we talked about the performance evaluation tool when we talked about large assemblies to find out what's taking so long to open them up. Performance evaluation is also available at the part level too. And at the part level, it's a really handy tool to use to see just what's going on in that part and what's taking so long. Now, in this case, if you look at that, the name of the file is Tired Iron. And it's got 29 features. It's all a solid. There's no surfaces. Total rebuild time in seconds is less than 4 seconds. Okay, almost 4 seconds. But of that 4 seconds, 75% of that is just to do the flex. There's a flex command in there. And these are the kind of things that are going to give you little insights as to what tools have what kind of an impact on my model. Again, to help you answer the question, what's taking so long to open my model up? Oftentimes you're going to find that this is a very, very handy tool to find out what's taking so long. It could be a lot of fillets, a lot of rounds, a lot of other goofy things like that. And some of them are justified, but a flex like this, maybe there's a workaround, okay? Maybe there's a better way of doing it. Speaking of shortcuts, you can copy features like planes and even features off of the design tree. You can grab it and pull it off like this. You hold the control key and the left mouse button then drag whatever it is that you want and drag it back onto the model. It's a great way of duplicating planes, adding more features if they've already been created. Great time saver. Okay, use drag and drop. It's simply just copying the part. And speaking of copying the part, let's say you have a part like this, an assembly, go back to the well and go back to the source and get another file. Not hardly. Hold the control key down and drag a part off. And if it's got, if it's a configured part, you're going to have the option to open up a different configuration. Then simply go ahead and mate it. Okay. Don't go back to the to your library to find out where that particular file is and get another one and drag it up here. If you have one in your model already, copy it. Okay. It shows up on the design tree the very same way as if you brought it in any other way. So it's a really, really huge time saver. Okay. So let's see where we're at right now. I think that's really about all that I have for today's stuff. I'm going to open up the phone lines here for allowing people to talk.
Did anybody have a question they wanted to ask Paul? Paul, I think you did a great job today. Just sharing your knowledge, and I hope you folks can appreciate all the time that Paul's put into putting this together. He's done it for a long time. And if any of you guys, once we get able to come back and visit your facilities, would like for Paul and me, if you'll have me, stop in and maybe look and kind of see how you guys are doing things, and maybe we can show you some best practices and standards that you can implement in some of your design processes. So with that, does anybody have any questions for Paul?
Remember, you're going to have to unmute yourselves.
Yes. Yeah, you have to unmute yourself.
I'm trying to do this with.
I know we had a question earlier about is the list of these going to be available at the end of the thing? The webinars are all published on our webinar, our CamWorks webinar page, which I put in the chat. If you want to take down that link out of the chat, you can go to our YouTube page, and this webinar will be on there with all the different features and functions that Paul showed you today, plus the webinars from before. So, anybody else have a question?
Vince, what'd you think?
No pressure, Vince.
I may not have a. Oh.
I've got a question regarding the life preserver. That's a feature I use with some of the work from home. I'm using a remote desktop.
Mm-hmm.
John, you still there? We can't hear you, John. We heard you. Can you hear him, Paul?
No, I can't.
I could hear him there for a little bit, then we lost him. I think that was John. No, you can't hear you. You're real muffled, John. I tell you what, John, just you can
type it in
or give Paul a call afterwards.
You got to unmute yourself if you want to chat.
He's unmuted because he's
all right.
There you are.
There he goes.
Be better this time.
Yes.
Yeah. Sorry, I was out on the patio and the wind I didn't factor into. I use the life preserver for the mouse gestures in the office, and I'm doing a lot of remote working with the remote desktop.
Yeah.
And one thing, the rotate model command in there is one I use a lot, and that seems to be grayed out when I'm using remote desktop.
That may be a function of how are you connecting? Are you VPNing in?
Yeah, VPNing in and then using
that may not respond very well because of that VPN wants to be immediate right now and in that session. When you do that remotely, that can cause a delay, and it probably just cancels it, turns itself off.
Okay. So what I've been doing is using the pan key from there, and then doing the right mouse button in the screen, and the rotate command comes up from there. And the reason I'm using it, it's probably due to the remote desktop again, is the middle mouse button seems to not work for me.
Yeah, that could be too. That could be a contributor as well, because if it's not set up the same way as it is in the office, if you will, it's not going to behave the same way, and that conflict can also often it defaults to saying, if SolidWorks is really great insofar as many different things, but if it's confused, its default mode is I ain't doing nothing. Okay, so it just kind of quits.
All right. Well, thank you. I just thought I'd ask, since it's one of the things we talked about.
Okay, thanks for asking. Any other questions? How about what you might like to see in future presentations?
Anybody else have any ideas?
Yeah, maybe I would say I'm kind of new to SolidWorks, so when I get stuck on something, I know sometimes I'll go to a senior type engineer that can really help me out.
Yeah.
And a lot of times they will make the comment, well, if you'd have done it this way.
Yeah.
I've run into that a few times. So I'm currently going through tutorials and stuff, working from home. It's a great time to actually dedicate time to learning SolidWorks. But, budgets are tight. I've never been able to get a formal class. I'm kind of learning as I go. But I think that would be something helpful if you could just kind of go through kind of from start to finish on maybe a 2 or 3 piece assembly of something, or a little more advanced part that has different surfaces or something like that, has a little more critical features to it that, certain things I'm finding you need to do in certain orders, and I'm kind of learning it the hard way.
Yeah. That's a good idea.
Yeah.
Also,
one of the other things that we can incorporate with that are over the last few years, there have been improvements, if you put it in the overall category, improvements, or perhaps you may want to say different ways, more efficient ways of putting an assembly together. Okay, where most of us were taught to go up to the when you're in the assembly mode, you go up to the toolbar and you clip on, you left click on that paper clip that says I'm going to add a new component, and this is how I'm going to put it together, and this is what I'm going to use to mate it. And so when you click on the paper clip, the mate command comes out. You don't need to use that anymore. Okay, and a lot of people will find that kind of surprising. So we could probably show that as well, because the whole idea of in the development of the software over the last several years has been to improve the overall user's efficiency. And one of the best things, just like the idea of using the mouse gestures and that Flyout Toolbar, has been ways of putting an assembly together faster and easier. And you still need 3 mates, okay, but you don't have to use that crazy paperclip and that manager, the product manager that comes down in the left-hand column. You don't need to use that, and it's faster and easier just to snap it together right there in the middle of the screen. We could show that too.
Hey, Paul.
Okay.
Yeah, that'd be great. Thanks.
Thank you. That was a good question. Vince has got a question. He wanted to know how to map the letter key to a command like M for measure.
Let me see if I can do this.
And just while Paul's looking that up, the gentleman just left the answer to the question there. There's also, you can go to mysolidworks.com, and there's tutorials on there too if you guys are wanting to learn some different features at home. And they've got little 3 to 5 minute vignettes where you can actually pick the features and functions you're trying to learn more about, and they can walk you through things. It's a really good resource. So.
Okay, so everyone should see my screen now, and I'm into SolidWorks. I don't have to do this with a part. I can do this with anything I want, but what I'm going to do is come up here to the toolbar, and virtually anywhere in this toolbar. It's a little easier if I'm in a gray area. I'm gonna right click and I'm gonna go down here to customize. And this is the window where all of this kind of magic stuff happens. Here's my flyout toolbars, okay? And I can customize them all in here. Here's my mouse gestures, okay? There's all of that kind of great stuff. And right next to mouse gestures, Vince, is keyboard. Okay, so if you're a hotkey kind of guy and you want to incorporate, like you said, measure, use the measure command, I'm going to come over here to where it says search for, and I'm going to search for measure, M-E-A, there it is, measure. Okay, there's the measure command. And my shortcut is going to be the letter M. Okay, I'm not very creative or imaginative when it comes to what other ways to do that. But when I think of measure, I'm going to use the letter M. So just come in here and type whatever letter you want and then say OK, right? And so now when I want to measure, I'm going to hit the letter M on my keyboard, and here's my measure command. So I'm going to measure this from this side to this side, and here's all the information that I wanted to know and even more. Okay.